So you're saying his silence wasn't a punishment?
No, it was a change in the terms and conditions. She had just posted a notice that the old contract was void. He simply acted accordingly.
And the wife? What was her play here?
She thought she was the customer. She found out she was just a tenant in a building he owned, and he was about to turn the water off.
Welcome back to the Rulebook. I'm Cal Jensen.
And I'm Frank Miller.
We are the podcast for men who are tired of guessing the rules and are ready to start living by them. Every week, we take a story, a situation from a listener, and we break it down. We're not here for therapy speak or to talk about your feelings. We're here to talk about strategy, about cause and effect, and about winning the battles that matter.
That's right. Today, we're looking at a story about a man who discovered the rules of his marriage were a lie, so he wrote a new set. He was handed a script where he was the loser, and instead of playing the part, he walked off the set and took the cameras with him.
It's a powerful letter, and it gets right to the heart of what a lot of men are feeling today, that the goalposts are always moving. You think you're playing one game, and you find out your partner is playing another, and you're the only one who doesn't know the new rules.
And there's only one way to deal with that. You don't learn the new rules, you enforce the original ones, or you walk away from the table.
Exactly. And if that sounds like the kind of clarity you've been looking for, do us a favor. Take a second right now to hit that subscribe button and give us a like. It tells the algorithm that there are still men out there who believe in clear, time-tested principles. We appreciate it. All right, Frank, let's get into it. Here's the letter.
She told me I should try earning her affection instead of just expecting it all the time. The words were delivered so quietly, almost a whisper against the hum of the car engine, but they landed like a physical blow. I just kept my hands gripping the steering wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. In that one sentence, the entire architecture of our relationship collapsed. I was no longer her partner, her husband, the man she'd built a life with. I had been demoted. I was now a candidate, an applicant for a position I thought I'd held for years, and the terms of my employment had just been changed without my consent. It hadn't always been like this. The shift was subtle at first, a collection of small, dismissible moments. A distracted glance at her phone when I handed her flowers, a half smile that didn't reach her eyes when I offered to run her errands. I wrote it off as work fatigue, the simple weight of modern life piling up. We all have off days. But this felt different, like a slow leak of warmth from our home. She used to light up at the smallest gestures. I remember once, years ago, she'd been complaining for months about a loose cabinet hinge that squeaked every time she reached for a mug. I spent a Saturday afternoon fixing it, a 10-minute job I'd put off. When she discovered it, she didn't just say thank you. She teared up, pulled me close, and told me that was what love looked like, hearing the unspoken frustrations and quietly making them disappear. I used to know how to reach her. Now every gesture felt like it was being measured for effort, only to be immediately discounted. A few weeks before the drive, we were sitting on the couch. She was scrolling through her phone when she mentioned a friend's husband had planned a surprise anniversary getaway. She laughed while saying it, then added that some guys just seem to understand romance better. I waited for the playful wink, the familiar warmth that would signal it was a shared joke. Nothing came. She just returned to her screen, leaving the comment hanging in the air between us. The jab had weight. It was a comparison, and I was on the losing end. I started paying closer attention. The following Saturday, I made reservations at a little bistro she once loved, even calling ahead to ensure they had her favorite wine. When we sat down, she barely touched her glass, claiming she was watching her carbs. When the bill came, she didn't offer a word of thanks. She just stood up and walked ahead to the car, leaving me to settle the check alone. The silence on the drive home was heavy, until she broke it out of nowhere, telling me that real affection had to be earned. She said lavish gestures didn't equate to a real connection. Her tone was off, rehearsed, like she'd been reading from a script she'd found online and was trying out the lines. That night, I offered a simple back rub, a habit from our early days. No agenda, just a familiar touch. She pulled away, telling me I was too eager for praise and that it wasn't an attractive quality. I sat with that for a long time. Years ago, a cup of coffee brought to her in bed would earn me a kiss on the forehead and a soft murmur about how I was spoiling her. Now, the same gesture was met with a dismissive wave of her hand as she told me she was late. There was no eye contact, just a passing dismissal that made me feel invisible. It wasn't resentment that started to build in me, it was a profound confusion. I thought perhaps I had missed a cue, that I had grown inattentive without realizing it. So I doubled down. I brought home dinner from the Thai place she used to crave. I booked a weekend massage for her after a particularly stressful week at her job. Not once did she acknowledge the thought behind it. She used the gift card, but later remarked that she hadn't asked for it, that I was trying too hard. At the grocery store, I reached for her favorite yogurt, and she muttered that she could handle it, telling me to stop acting like she couldn't take care of herself. That moment hit harder than I expected. We once had a rhythm, a partnership. She'd lean into me in the checkout line, whispering jokes. Now she stood 2 feet away, arms crossed, a fortress of one. When I asked if everything was all right, she shot back that I always asked that, and that maybe I should stop acting like something was wrong all the time. Affection had become something I was supposed to win, not something we shared. I'd reach out and she'd pull back. I'd make plans and she'd criticize the effort. Then came the sentence that froze me in place. She had just returned from lunch with new friends from a workshop, and she was glowing. It was a light I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I asked how it went, and she beamed, saying it was refreshing to be around people who didn't need constant approval. That's when I finally understood. I was no longer a partner in her mind. I was a performer, and my performance was failing to impress the judge. That weekend, on the drive to her cousin's birthday party, she stared out the window and delivered the line that changed everything. The quiet demand that I earn her affection. At the party, she barely acknowledged my presence, telling people I was just being quiet when they asked. One of her cousins joked that I was the chauffeur. She laughed, not a nervous, polite laugh, but a genuine one. When we pulled into our driveway later, she didn't wait for me to park. She just got out and walked inside. I sat there in the car, the engine off, staring at the blank dashboard. I had given her my time, my energy, my comfort, my love. And somehow that had become my failing. Earn my affection. The phrase looped in my mind like a taunt. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. It was a line drawn in a game I had never agreed to play. That night, I didn't reach for her in bed. I just lay there, noticing everything. The silence where laughter used to be. The calculated indifference that had replaced shared joy. And most of all, the shift in the rules. It wasn't about us anymore. And I was beginning to understand that I had been funding an enterprise that no longer valued its source. That realization didn't come with rage or heartbreak. It came with a quiet, permanent resolve. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to prove myself. I was simply going to stop spending affection where it yielded no return. And the moment that choice became real, everything started to change. The first thing I withdrew was the anticipatory effort. There was no announcement, just a decision. That Sunday, she dropped hints about needing a ride to the salon. Usually, I would have offered before she finished the sentence. This time, I just sipped my coffee and replied that it sounded like a full day and she'd probably want to leave early. Her expression tightened for a fraction of a second, then she shrugged and went back to her phone. Later, I heard her muttering about surge pricing on a ride app. I was still sharing a house with her, but I had ceased anticipating her comfort. It felt like peeling off a skin that had grown too tight. The small acts of service stopped. I didn't check in during her errands. When she returned, the grocery bags stayed in the car until she, with loud, pointed footsteps, brought them in herself. One evening, she began describing a friend's husband in glowing terms, a take-charge kind of man who was always planning date nights. She turned to gauge my reaction. I simply asked if she wanted help with dinner. She frowned, as if I'd completely missed the point. Dinner conversations became like business meetings. I would ask how her day was, and she'd reply with a single word: fine. Then silence. One night, she wore a new blouse and lingered in the hallway, clearly waiting for a compliment. I glanced up from my book, gave a slight nod, and returned to my page. She eventually disappeared upstairs. I started using my own car for everything. We began leaving gatherings in 2 separate vehicles. One night, she said she was staying longer at a friend's place. I simply drove home. An hour later, her voice cut through the quiet of the house, accusing me of not waiting for her. I replied calmly that she had said she was staying. The front door shut harder than necessary. By the middle of the week, her requests became more pointed. She noted that I hadn't planned anything in a while. I just nodded and said I'd been busy. When she waited for more of an explanation, there was none. She stopped folding my laundry, leaving it in a pile. I didn't ask her to resume. I simply handled it myself. The small acts that once symbolized care now came with invisible strings, and I had stopped playing tug-of-war. Thursday night, she sat beside me on the couch, uncharacteristically close. After a long silence, she said she didn't feel seen. I let the sentence settle before I answered. I told her she was looking at a man who had felt that way for months. She opened her mouth, then shut it. That night, she texted asking when I'd be home from work. I finished my tasks, packed up, and drove in silence. When I walked in, she was standing in the kitchen and remarked that I could have let her know. I replied that I figured I didn't need permission to finish my work. This wasn't retaliation, it was realignment. She had grown so accustomed to a constant stream of comfort, convenience, and validation that its absence felt like cruelty. But I wasn't being cruel. I was simply ending the daily sacrifices that went unacknowledged. I unplugged from the reward loop that no longer fed anything meaningful. When she tried to bait me with memories of our first date, I agreed that it was a nice night and went back to my book. When she asked what I was looking for these days, I told her I was looking for balance. When she asked what that looked like, I said it looked like mutual value. The evenings grew quieter. She was waiting for the old version of me to reappear, but that version had been running on fumes for years. I was conserving what remained for someone willing to meet me halfway. I went to work, I went to the gym, I called my brother for the first time in months. I ordered dinner for one without a second thought. The food tasted better when it wasn't seasoned with resentment. One evening, she came into the room and asked if I was okay. I told her I was centered. She waited, as if there should be more to the sentence. There wasn't. A few days later, she tried to provoke an argument, suggesting that checking out was a sign of emotional immaturity. I stood calmly at the counter and stirred my coffee, telling her that maturity was knowing where your energy belonged. I stopped monitoring her moods, letting her storms pass without lifting a finger. One evening, she asked if we could talk about where things were going. I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, she seemed genuinely uncertain. I told her I was moving with what was real. When she asked what that meant, I explained that the version of me that used to orbit around her reactions was officially off duty. She started texting me articles and videos. I used to respond instantly. Now, I left them unread. A few days into this new rhythm, she walked into the kitchen and asked if I was seeing someone else. I shook my head while slicing a bell pepper and told her no, I was seeing myself. She scoffed that it sounded dramatic. I replied that it was overdue. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. By midweek, she asked what I wanted from her. I told her nothing. When she asked if I wanted to fix this, I gestured between us and explained that this used to be a partnership, but it had become a stage where I performed and she critiqued. She crossed her arms, accusing me of punishing her by going silent. I looked her in the eye and said I was giving her what she claimed to value: space. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was clean. That weekend, I began packing a few bags. Nothing dramatic. I wasn't running away. I was stepping out of an echo chamber. She saw the suitcase on Sunday afternoon and asked if I was leaving. I told her I was, for now. Her voice cracked when she asked why. I told her it was because a man doesn't invest in something that treats him like a transaction. She protested that she never said I had to buy her love. I didn't have to argue. I just told her that she didn't have to say it. I stayed at a friend's guest house. The peace was immediate. No tension hanging over breakfast, no emotional tax to pay just for existing. Her calls went unanswered. Her texts, escalating in confusion and frustration, sat unread. She seemed to believe I was punishing her, but it was simpler than that. For years, I had extended affection like an open tap. Now, the account was closed. A few days later, she showed up at my office unannounced with a bag of food. I had the receptionist tell her I was booked for the rest of the day. A message arrived that night telling me this was getting extreme. I replied with a single sentence. Perspective arrives in silence. We finally met at a quiet cafe. She looked different, less confident, more alert. She told me I had changed. I corrected her, saying I had returned. Returned to what? She asked. To self-respect. She insisted she never asked me to leave. I reminded her that I stepped away when it became clear my presence was only valued when it served her convenience. She murmured that everything felt transactional now. I told her that in that case, she was finally beginning to understand the cost of one-sided generosity. She asked again if this was punishment. I shook my head. Punishment implies anger. This was clarity. Her voice softened as she told me she missed the way I used to care. I told her I hadn't stopped caring. I had just stopped proving it. Her final attempt came in the form of a hand-delivered letter at my office. It was filled with memories of our best times, ending with a single question. She asked if it was too late to return to something real. But clarity alone doesn't rebuild a demolished structure. We met one last time, in a park. She told me she was in therapy, that she had realized she never learned how to value what comes freely, assuming it would always be there to take. She said she wanted to try again, this time with integrity. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing but a calm finality. I asked if she understood what respect required. She nodded. Then I told her that she would understand when I said I was no longer available for speculation. If she ever felt unsure again, she shouldn't look in my direction. Her eyes welled as she whispered that she thought we'd have more time. I looked at her, not with anger, but with truth, and told her we did. She had simply spent it all. Restoration isn't always reunion. She once asked me to earn her affection. She learned, through its complete absence, that affection spent without recognition eventually ceases to exist. This wasn't a story of revenge. It was the story of a man who reclaimed his peace and a woman who discovered that love isn't a performance to be managed. It's a currency backed by reciprocity. And her account was, finally, empty.
Okay, Frank, there is a lot to unpack there. But my first thought, honestly, is just the weight of that. The slow realization that you've become invisible in your own home.
Invisible is the wrong word, Cal. He wasn't invisible. He was being audited. Every action, every gesture was being put on a ledger, and she was the one marking it pass or fail. The flowers, the dinner reservations, fixing things around the house, those weren't acts of partnership anymore. They were submissions for her approval, and she was rejecting every single one.
The line that just stops you in your tracks is, "Earn my affection." In the car, so quiet. What is a man supposed to do with that?
He did exactly what he was supposed to do. He gripped the steering wheel, and he let a certain kind of emotion die. That initial hurt, that confusion, you feel it. Of course you do. You're human. But you let it pass through you. You don't live there. Because right behind that hurt comes the most useful tool a man has in a situation like this: cold, clear anger.
A lot of guys would hear that and think anger is the problem, that it's destructive. Walk me through it. Why is anger the correct first step here?
Because it's a signal. It's the fire alarm in the building. It tells you a boundary has been breached. Sadness makes you passive. Sadness makes you ask, what did I do wrong? Sadness makes you want to go back and try to fix it, to apologize for something that wasn't your fault. Anger, real anger, is clarifying. It's a force that says, no, this is unacceptable. It's not about screaming or punching walls, it's about a change in temperature. The engine of the relationship just seized up, and anger is the mechanic that comes out, looks at it, and says, all right, time to take this thing apart and see what's broken. In this case, he realized the whole engine block was cracked. You don't patch that, you replace it.
So that feeling wasn't rage, it was resolve.
Exactly. He says it himself. It came with a quiet, permanent resolve. That's the moment the game changed. He stopped being a participant in her drama and became an observer. And from that position, he could finally see the whole board and plan his next move. That switch from being the hurt husband to the strategist, that's everything. That's the moment he took back control. It's not about revenge, not yet. It's about arresting the damage. You don't keep pumping money into a failing business. You stop the bleeding, assess the situation, and liquidate the assets that are dragging you down. Her expectation of his unearned service was a toxic asset, so he cut it loose.
That's a powerful way to frame it. For our listeners, let us know in the comments. Have you ever felt that switch flip from hurt to cold anger? That moment of clarity where you knew you weren't going to play the victim anymore? We want to hear about it.
It's the most important flip a man can make.
Okay, Frank, let's get into the strategy. The letter is a masterclass in tactical withdrawal. After that moment in the car, he doesn't argue, he doesn't beg, he just stops. He writes, I was simply going to stop spending affection where it yielded no return. Where did he make his first correct play?
His first correct play was that night. He lay in bed and didn't reach for her. Silence. Non-action. In a situation like this, your first move is to do nothing. She just declared war. She announced a new set of rules where she holds all the power, where she is the queen and he is the court jester trying to win a smile. The average guy, the guy who hasn't learned the rules, he would have tried to talk it out.
Right. My first instinct would be, we have to communicate. What does that mean? What do you need from me?
And the game would have been over right there. Because by asking, what do you need from me, you are accepting her frame. You are agreeing that you are the applicant and she is the hiring manager. You've already lost. His silence, his withdrawal of touch, that was his counteroffer. It was a rejection of her terms. He was saying, I do not recognize the legitimacy of this new arrangement, without a single word.
And the next morning, the salon ride. He doesn't offer, he just sips his coffee. That seems so small, but in the letter, it feels huge.
It is huge. Think of it like a foundation. For years, he's been pouring the concrete of his attention, his service, his comfort. He made sure the ground she walked on was solid. He anticipated her needs. He was the general contractor of her convenience. When she said, earn my affection, she was basically telling him the foundation wasn't good enough, and he needed to start over, this time with gold-plated rebar. His response wasn't to argue about the rebar. It was to stop pouring the concrete. Completely. The ride to the salon? That was one of the supply lines. He just cut it. And he watched.
And her reaction was just a tightened expression. She didn't blow up.
Not yet. She's testing him. A woman like this, who has grown accustomed to that level of service, she doesn't see it as a gift. She sees it as an entitlement. When it's withdrawn, her first thought isn't, oh, I've been ungrateful. Her first thought is, there's been a service interruption. She thinks he's malfunctioning. So she'll push a few buttons to see if the machine comes back online. The hints about the salon, bringing in the groceries herself with loud, pointed footsteps, those are diagnostic tests. She's checking to see if he's really broken or just needs a reset.
And he just keeps refusing to reset. The compliments stop. He stops waiting for her. He starts driving his own car. This is a systematic shutdown.
It's a controlled demolition, Cal. He is taking the structure of their dynamic apart, piece by piece, but he's doing it on his terms. He's not blowing it up with a screaming match. He's unscrewing the bolts. Each one of those small acts of service he withdraws is another bolt removed. She starts to feel the structure wobble, and it confuses her. She tries one of her old tactics, praising another man, the take-charge friend's husband.
Right, the classic comparison jab, a move designed to make him feel inadequate and spark him into action to prove himself.
And look at his response. I simply asked if she wanted help with dinner. Beautiful. It was a complete non sequitur. She threw a punch, and he just stepped aside and pointed at the refrigerator. He refused to engage on her chosen battlefield. He is showing her, through action, that her opinions of him, her comparisons, her little psychological games, they no longer have any power. They don't generate the emotional response she's looking for. It's like she's pushing a button for an elevator that has no electricity.
So, am I right in thinking the game was already over at that point, once he showed her that her main weapons were useless?
The outcome was decided. She just didn't know it yet. She keeps escalating. She stops doing his laundry. This is a classic move. It's a withdrawal of her own service to try and force his hand, to make him complain so they can have the argument she wants to have.
And he doesn't take the bait. He just does it himself.
Of course, a man takes care of his own affairs. He demonstrated that his operational capacity was not dependent on her. This is critical. He showed her that he could function perfectly fine, perhaps even better, on his own. She thought she was a pillar holding up the roof. He showed her she was a decorative column, and he was perfectly happy to remove it. Her power was based on the illusion that he needed her for these things, for his comfort, for his peace. The moment he proved that illusion false, her leverage disappeared.
Then comes the conversation on the couch. She says, "I don't feel seen." That's a line straight out of the modern therapy playbook.
It is, and it's a trap. It's an invitation for him to comfort her, to apologize, to ask what he can do to make her feel seen. It's a bid to pull him right back into the old dynamic. And his response is the coldest, most beautiful checkmate in the entire letter. I told her she was looking at a man who had felt that way for months.
He turned the weapon right back on her.
He didn't just turn it back on her. He validated her statement, but changed the context entirely. He agreed with the premise that someone wasn't being seen, but he corrected the subject. He was saying, you are correct, there is a problem, but you have misidentified the victim. He used her language, her framework, and showed her that it applied more accurately to him. She had no response. What can you say to that? He took the charge she was leveling at him and showed her it was a confession of her own behavior.
Okay, that's a huge development. What's the right play here in your book? Because at this point, some guys might think, okay, I have her attention, now we can fix this.
And that would be the fatal mistake. That would be like cornering a wild animal and then trying to pet it. He has the leverage. He has the strategic high ground. The absolute worst thing he could do now is give it away. He needs to press the advantage, not by being cruel, but by continuing the withdrawal. He needs to move from a tactical withdrawal of affection to a strategic withdrawal of his presence.
Which is exactly what he does. He starts packing.
He doesn't just pack. He doesn't sneak out in the middle of the night. He does it on a Sunday afternoon where she can see it. It's not an emotional outburst. It's a calm, logistical maneuver. He's not running away. He's relocating his headquarters to a more secure position. When she finally asks him why, he gives her the bottom line. A man doesn't invest in something that treats him like a transaction. He's not calling her names. He's not dredging up the past. He's giving her a simple, unbreakable economic principle. The business is failing. He, the primary investor, is pulling his capital. Looking at this point in the story, what would your next move have been? He's got the bags packed. He's delivered the line. What's the play? Lay out your strategy in the comments. I'm curious to see who understands the importance of follow-through.
Because the follow-through is everything. He leaves. He goes to a friend's guest house. He cuts communication. He lets her texts escalate. Frank, walk me through the power of that silence. She's now reaching out, trying to get that connection back, and he's giving her nothing.
The silence is where the lesson is learned. All her life, she's operated on the principle that her attention is the prize. Men should compete for it. Her husband should be grateful for it. She's the sun, and he's a planet in her orbit. By withdrawing and going completely silent, he has removed himself from her solar system. It's a profound shock to her reality. She no longer has anyone to perform for, anyone to judge.
She's left alone with the consequences of her own actions. The unanswered calls, the unread texts, that's not him punishing her, that's him holding up a mirror. The emptiness she feels is a direct reflection of the emptiness she created.
And then she shows up at his office. This feels like a desperate move.
It's a Hail Mary. She's losing control of the narrative, so she tries to change the venue. She brings food, a classic gesture, trying to trigger the memory of a time when she was the nurturer. She is trying to force an interaction on her terms, in his professional space, where he might be more likely to cave just to avoid a scene.
But he doesn't even see her. He has the receptionist handle it.
A brilliant professional move. He treated a personal intrusion like an unwanted sales call. He delegated it. He sent a clear message. You do not have access to me. My world continues to function without you. In fact, you are not even important enough to interrupt my workday. The level of disrespect in that gesture is precisely equal to the level of disrespect she showed him for months. It's a perfect rebalancing of the scales.
And his one-sentence text reply later, perspective arrives in silence.
That's a leader's response. He's not angry, he's not emotional, he's teaching. He's giving her the key to understanding what's happening, but he's making her do the work of turning it in the lock. He's telling her, the answer you're looking for will not come from me. It will come from you when you finally shut up and think about what you've done. He has fully transitioned from husband to something else. He's the immovable object, and her unstoppable force just shattered against him.
Okay, let's move to the aftermath. They finally meet at the cafe. The power dynamic has completely inverted. He says she looked less confident, more alert.
Of course she did. She's been in the desert for weeks. For the first time, maybe in her entire life, her primary source of validation and comfort has been turned off at the main. She's thirsty. He's sitting there with a glass of water and he's not offering her a drink. She's no longer the judge, she's the defendant, waiting for the verdict.
And she tries the line, "You've changed."
And he corrects her, "I've returned." Another masterful move. He's reframing the entire situation. He is not the one who deviated from the norm, she is. He is simply returning to his factory settings, to a state of self-respect. He is communicating that the man she took for granted, the performing, approval-seeking man, that was the aberration. This calm, centered, independent man is his true self.
And he gets to the core of it when he talks about generosity. She was finally beginning to understand the cost of one-sided generosity. This seems to be the central lesson for him.
It's the lesson for every man. Your energy, your time, your affection, it's the most valuable currency you have. You do not give it away for free to people who don't value it. You don't throw it into a hole. This guy was pouring 1,000 gallons of goodwill into a bucket with no bottom. He finally realized it and turned off the spigot. She's now staring at an empty bucket and complaining that it's empty. Well, yeah, stop drilling holes in the bucket. He taught her a lesson in economics that she never got in school.
The final act is the letter she writes, the meeting in the park. This is the moment where most stories would have the reconciliation. She's been to therapy. She says she understands. She wants to try again. Why was it so important for him to say no?
Because trust, once it's been systematically dismantled, cannot be rebuilt with a few pretty words and a therapy session. Think of it like a building. She didn't just crack a window. She spent a year taking a sledgehammer to the load-bearing walls. The whole structure is compromised. Now she shows up with a bucket of spackle and says, "Look, I'm ready to fix it." It's too late. The building is condemned. A smart man, a man who values his own safety, does not move back into a condemned building.
So when he says, "I am no longer available for speculation," what does that mean in your book?
It means he's not a startup company looking for venture capital. He's not going to invest his life in the hope that she might, this time, provide a return. Her promises are worthless because her track record is a catastrophic failure. He is telling her that his future is not a gamble he's willing to let her take. He's off the market. Not for other women necessarily, but for her brand of high-risk, low-return emotional speculation.
It sounds like a complete restoration of his dignity. He isn't walking away broken, he is walking away whole.
He's walking away more whole than he's been in years.
Look at what he gained. He reclaimed his time, his energy, his peace of mind. He started going to the gym, calling his brother. He reconnected with himself. The letter says, "I was seeing myself." That's the ultimate victory. He removed a parasite, and his own health immediately started to improve. The satisfaction he feels isn't from hurting her. It's from the deep, quiet peace that comes from respecting yourself enough to remove yourself from a toxic situation. He didn't just win the battle, he won the war for his own soul.
The final line from him to her is devastating. She says, "I thought we'd have more time." And he says, "We did. You simply spent it all."
Clean, final, true. He's not blaming her. He's stating a fact. She was given a fortune, and she squandered it. The account is empty. The bank is closed. It's the perfect end to the negotiation. There are no more appeals. The judgment is final. He is free. He built a new life not on the ashes of his marriage, but on the solid foundation of his own self-worth.
It's a powerful story of reclaiming your own frame. For those of you who have been through a similar fire, tell us how you rebuilt things on your terms. Your story could be a blueprint for another man out there looking for a way out. Share it in the comments.
And don't share the stories about how you worked through it and she had a breakthrough and now you're happier than ever. Share the stories about how you established a boundary and enforced it and what came after. That's the blueprint that matters.
All right, Frank, let's boil this down. Every episode, we try to pull a few clear, actionable rules from the story. What is the takeaway from this? What's in the rulebook today?
Rule number 1 is simple. When the terms of the contract are changed without your consent, the contract is void. Her "earn my affection" line was a unilateral rewriting of the terms. His duty was not to negotiate the new, bad terms. His duty was to recognize the contract had been breached and to begin protecting his assets. Your dignity is your primary asset.
That's a good one. What's rule number 2?
Rule number 2. Match rhetoric with action, not with more rhetoric. She used words as weapons, comparisons, jabs, passive-aggressive comments. He didn't fight back with his own words. He fought back with action, and more importantly, with inaction. He stopped the services. He withdrew his presence. He let the consequences of her words play out in the real world. Stop arguing. Start acting. The silence of a man's absence is louder than any argument he could ever make.
And the third?
Rule number 3. Victory isn't reconciliation. Victory is peace. This man's win wasn't getting his wife back. It was getting himself back. The goal is not to return to the way things were. The goal is to get to a place where you are centered, strong, and your peace is not dependent on someone else's approval. If that means walking away, you walk away. The real prize is a life lived on your own terms. That's a victory that lasts.
The contract is void, match words with action, and victory is peace. Solid rules to live by. That's all the time we have for today. A huge thank you to the listener who sent in that letter. Your clarity is going to help a lot of men. And thanks to all of you for tuning in.
If you want to make sure you don't miss the next episode, subscribe and hit that like button. Stay sharp.